Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Muslim Gamers Podcast. We're glad to be with you for another episode, and today's one is especially meaningful. We're joined by a special guest, Amin Momand, a personal friend of mine and also someone who works with Lamps of Light, an organization based in Southern California that focuses on spiritual wellness, mental health, and addiction recovery within the Muslim community. We've had this topic on our minds for a while, and we're finally diving in: addiction, gaming, and the Muslim experience. It's a topic that touches more people than we often realize, whether it's through games, social media, or other habits that spiral beyond our control. Today, we'll be reflecting on how we engage with gaming, what addiction can look like in different forms, and how we as Muslims can approach balance, healing, purpose when it comes to our digital lives. We're really grateful to Amin for joining us and offering his insights, and we hope this episode sparks some good conversation and reflection. Let's get into it. Assalamu alaikum, guys. We're also, forgot to mention in the intro, joined by Abdul, who, if I can say right here on the podcast, congratulations, mashallah, to his new addition to his family. He's been pretty busy with that. And assalamu alaikum to Amin. Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
How
yeah, he's your friend, not mine. Just to clarify that on record. Just kidding.
Can I mention both of your history as well? Or no?
Go for it.
Too late at this point. So Abdul and Amin used to be roommates.
Let's go.
I actually got to meet Abdul through Amin because they were roommates when we wanted to get this idea of a podcast started. In fact, we have a lot to owe to Amin for the start of this podcast, because if it wasn't for Amin, we wouldn't be here together. I wouldn't have connected with Abdul to get this podcast started, alhamdulillah. So if you want to know, one of the original founders of the Muslim Gamers Podcast is right here.
Wait, did Amin introduce us?
Yes.
Or you knew Amin? How did you know Amin?
I knew Amin through this thing we were doing called Peer Counselors.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, there's another story.
Yeah, because I remember you were with the Riverside guys too, right?
No, I was. I hung out with them once in a while. I'm mostly like Rancho Fontana-ish.
I mean, I will say, like, alhamdulillah if I have any credit to that, but, not trying to take any credit for anything, but I was at least there when, Abdul created Muslim Gamers, but I take no credit for that. That was 100% Abdul's idea, and it was cool to see that get off the ground, and I think when COVID hit, it was pretty valuable resource for a lot of Muslim gamers. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
And then when I heard that he was trying to do a podcast, I thought it was really cool. So I don't even though I do play games, I don't feel as I don't know, I don't feel as nerdy enough to be able to just be able to speak on it with any form of intelligence. It's just more of just playing and having fun. But glad to be here.
Just clarify, you play a game called Dota 2.
I haven't played that in a long time. I played Dead by Daylight now.
Oh, Dead by Daylight. Okay.
I mean that's pre-kids, bro. No one has time for a 45-minute game with kids. You kidding me?
I know. Yeah, League of Legends is gone for me. It's been a long time.
It's expired.
Yeah, especially nothing like competitive. Yeah, I'm mostly just focused on single player.
Yeah,
stuff.
It's not even worth it time-wise. Like, you're just spending 45 minutes like on one match. Like, you could do so many other games.
Well, we'll see. How come we didn't know that before?
In terms of,
I knew that before.
Like I mean no, like okay,
like
wait.
Play other games in 45 minutes.
Yeah. Faraj, don't make me start saying stuff about you. Mr. I want to play. I should get at least 3 hours a day minimum.
That I'll admit was dumb. The fact that I even brought that up to my wife, I asked for 3 hours a day. Yeah. That's
You asked for 3 hours a day,
bro. See, no, even the fact that Amin brought that up to me, I was like, wait, did I really say that? Like, man,
did she say yes?
No, look. No, I was not even married yet, and he came. Like they were both there, and Faraj was like saying like, look at me, and like you can agree with me here on this, right? And asked for like 3 hours sounds reasonable, right, per day, like for her to give me that space and that time, and I pled the fifth hard on that one because. One, I'm not married, so I don't want to speak before I know any better. But I could not. I mean, I couldn't even see that outside of marriage. I could do 3 hours a day.
Holy crap! That's so funny. I did not know that.
Married, so.
See, even I forgot about that. Like, alhamdulillah, I guess grown and mature.
I wish I was there to see your wife's face. Like, man. Is this?
It was more of like just an eye roll, and
Yeah. which is a normal occurrence between her and I, where she just rolls her eyes at me for whatever. Happens all the time. I'm used to it at this point.
That's so funny.
Yeah, well, alhamdulillah. Thank you again for joining us here. I mean, before we get into it, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, a little bit, and what the topic of addiction means to you?
Yeah, so I'm a pre-licensed therapist. Inshallah, hoping to get licensed, within the year. But I got my master's in it was a dual program for academic counseling as well as clinical counseling. And then I kind of started off in like community colleges, kind of trying to see where the school counseling route would go. And then I just knew I wanted that clinical component as well. And so when I started working in the clinical field, I was really like I had kind of been out of practice with it, and I was really kind of doubting myself and didn't know where to start. But kind of networked my way into my first gig, and I actually was also desperate. So that led me to working with my first population, which was the sex offenders on parole. So individuals from criminal justice population, but specific tier. And then that gravitated into working with substance abuse and addictions, and a detox inpatient outpatient center. And then I worked briefly at with at-risk youth that were involved with either foster care, foster youth, juvie hall, under 18 population. And then I started working for Khalil Center, just general population Muslim community, and a lot of addiction did come up. And then now I jumped on board with Lamps of Light, which is a Muslim organization that is primarily focusing on the Muslim population, but not exclusive, that struggle with addiction. And it's we know it's prevalent. We know it's been swept under the rug for so many years, and culturally, community wise, whatever. But we're at that point where it's so prevalent now. You can't hide it anymore. So it's just something that needs to be addressed, and we're hoping to hit it full force, but also to add a spiritual component to it as well, which I think is really important because we do have our own traditional understanding of mental health in Islam, and Western psychology is also a great resource, but it can be enhanced definitely for sure by incorporating traditional Islamic ideas as well. So it's we're kind of kind of just getting our feet wet, but there's really a lot of potential. And I'm sorry I'm going to be blowing my nose and stuff because I have a cold and runny nose. But
No, that's okay.
That's
I
fine.
mean, once again, thanks for being a trooper and joining us when you're a little under the weather. I know there's a bug going around too, but inshallah, maybe the viewers will and the listeners will get a little
how's
bit
my
longer.
volume? Is it good? Sound is good?
Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds fine.
Okay.
I think it's a super valuable need, especially for the Muslim community. Like you were saying, mental health as a whole has been like slept on the rug for so many years, so many decades. And I think finally it's changing. At least the narrative is changing, especially and specifically around addiction. And that's just so prevalent. I'm sure all of us know.
And I want to clarify that we don't just work with like substance addiction, right? We also work with behavioral addiction and behavioral problems in general. So that's a really big distinction because alcohol, substance use, that's not the same as gambling, pornography, potentially gaming, if you want to add that in there too.
Can we ask what kind of actually even including the substances, just for my own curiosity, are you allowed to talk about like what it is that you mostly see in your work at Lamps of Light, what type of addictions that you're mainly facing?
I mean, it's not, I don't, I think that we are going to have, the more and more clients we see, the more data we're going to get, and we'll be able to get better demographics over time. But we're still a fairly new organization, so I think that in terms of I mean, there's definitely clients that I'm working with that are struggling with uh, um, different forms of addiction, substances, pornography, um, you know, uh, sex is also an addiction. Um, and when it comes to like substance use, it's not always just one substance. It could be multiple things. It could be certain drugs and alcohol. It could be a whole variety of things. And sometimes people try and quit one drug, and then to do that they switch to another drug, right? So I'm using cocaine, I want to stop, so I switch to weed, but then that's it really doesn't it's not a permanent solution, because it's you're basically you're switching to just take the edge off, but you're not getting the same high, and then you eventually try something worse, or you go back to your original drug and you binge, and then you do way more than you usually do. So it's there's um there are some similar effects on the brain and a person in terms of behavioral addictions versus substance use addictions, but substances have an added layer, an added component, because of it being something that's actually potentially chemically changing, damaging.
Like the biochemical aspect,
You're
basically.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then there's other aspects of that make it worse. A person's predisposition to one drug versus another. So
Okay. The kind of piggybacking on what you said about there's no one final solution to it. Even like especially within our Muslim community too, we tend to see, or at least we have for a long time seen mental health as something where it's just something that just needs to be um, like the solution for it is just maybe he's not reading enough Quran, or he's not praying enough, or something along those lines,
mm-hmm.
where I've heard people who struggle with mental health, they say they don't want to talk about it at the masajid or within the Muslim community, because that's the advice they get, as if they're not reading enough Quran, or as if like
Mm-hmm.
hearing that advice makes them feel worse, because it's like, oh, so you're telling me I'm mentally ill or have a mental problem because I'm not a good enough Muslim. And same thing can go for addictions as well. In fact, there was one time I heard a khutbah about addictions, and I heard one of the community members asking the khatib, like, "Oh, mashallah, your khutbah was really good, but you didn't give us the solution to like how to completely cure addiction." And the khatib kind of like struggled to like answer that, because it's like there's no real answer to it. So yeah, just wanted to state that there.
Yeah, I mean, we call that spiritual bypassing. So the idea is that um, if I have like a flesh wound, right, that needs to be treated medically, right, I can't pray for the wound to be stitched up. Similarly, I can't pray away every single thing that is a behavioral, habitual problem, or something based on trauma or otherwise. I mean, dua, and there's a place for spirituality. There's a place for dua. There's a place for, you know, um, uh, bettering my relationship with Allah, and, trying to, use my faith as a way to keep me, um, you know, doing what is pleasing to Allah, and to push me away from things that are preventative. But when you're talking about mental health, you're not just talking. We consist of mind, body, and soul. All of it each one needs their own particular nourishment, right? And so you can't ultimately say that every single problem that I am exposed to is a spiritual problem. and X number of dhikr and X number of salah and X number of, giving sadaqah or zakat is going to, expiate me of that. Those are all things that can help, that can benefit, but at the same time, you still have to put the work in. I remember, just to give you one example, like I remember when I was working with some of my sex offender clients, I had one particular client who was a Catholic who, he believes in, expiation of sins through confessional, right? And so, he said that he confessed and he was forgiven for his sins by the priest or whoever it was. And, so like, what are we doing here? Like, what do I need to talk to you about? Right. And then the question is, okay, well, do you still have, attraction for, inappropriate age groups or whatever, right? And if the answer is still yes, then there you go, right? We're not. It's not a question of whether or not Allah is going to forgive you for your sins or not, right? That's not the question here. The question is what are you going to do when you're back in society and you still have urges to reoffend, right? Where is that coming from? Is that coming from a lack of spirituality, right? Or is that coming from perhaps a test that Allah is giving you that, takes more than just, spirituality and worship to overcome.
So. Yeah, and sometimes like one of the main things could be environmental factors where that also is seen as a test from Allah, and a person may or may not have within the capability to change those factors themselves by moving, but it's not always a realistic solution for everybody, where it's like, every time you have a problem, you just move.
I mean, like another Muslim example would be like when the Prophet passed away, right? Like that was traumatic, right? We heard like Ali ibn Abi Talib, he and or perhaps Uthman, like they closed themselves off, they isolated, right? Umar al-Khattab, he swore to kill anybody that said he was dead. Did Umar al-Khattab lack in spirituality and in iman? Did he lack in worship? Right? Then because if that's the case, how could he possibly have that kind of response?
Right.
So that exposes a human element that shows that we are not impervious just spiritually to being tested with something that affects our psyche. That was a traumatic experience, and then it wasn't until Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu revealed those verses, or not revealed, but recited those verses to the community for them to hear, that Umar al-Khattab was like, oh, it's like it was like the first time he had heard that, even though he already knew those verses, right? And so that's a classic example of how, like, okay, like what can we possibly say, even in comparison to us, about his spirituality? And then if we struggle with something mental health wise, a bad habit or whatever we're trying to get rid of, or depression, anxiety, whatever, PTSD, that, it's just you haven't prayed enough.
Yeah. No, I really like that example. Really does bring bring to light, like you said, that human element. One thing I wanted to get into, I mean, we don't really, because I don't know if people want to hear like a textbook definition of an addiction, because when people hear the word addiction, they already have an idea. It implies that there's too much of something, for someone, whatever it is they're addicted to, whether it's a behavior or a substance. But when is it that, some sort of that too much becomes a problem? When is it that people with an addiction start or need to start seeking help with a professional?
Well, I mean, okay, like,
or even maybe taking a level down, is before they even, like, when they need to start admitting, okay, I have a problem.
I mean, so I was trying to pull up something, but I think that based on like the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for disorders, right, and diseases is or mental health related ones, right? Um, Basically, the
Could
key
you
word
explain
is
that
not.
real quick for like our viewers that might not be familiar with what the DSM is?
Yeah, I don't even have my book around. It's probably at the office. I don't know, it's a big fat book. I mean, it's it's Western psychology's Bible of mental health related disorders or diseases, right? And so it's like basically, in America, we classify a disease or a disorder, a mental health one, as basically something that causes a person to be what we would call maladaptive, meaning like they can't function in their everyday life. So if a person is going to school, working, has multiple roles in the home, husband, wife, father, parent, and they're struggling to be able to handle those responsibilities. Even basic hygiene. I mean, whatever it could be, right? Not getting enough sleep. I mean, all those things, if they add up to a certain point where a person is just basically deteriorating, they can't do their daily functioning to be able to, take care of themselves, take care of their lives, their responsibilities. That's when something becomes, clinical.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's usually the general definition. And then, you know, um, it's more even more apparent when it's in more than one area of your life or domain of your life. So if it's work slash home slash uh, social life, whatever, like the more the school, the more of those that you're struggling with, the more apparent it becomes that you are struggling with something,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and So in terms of like when it becomes a problem, I think that it's pretty relative to every person's context and what they're going through and what how they're trying to function in their life. And I think that um, everyone everyone has their own toolbox of things that they try to deal with problems like these. And um, I think that when you've exhausted that and you realize that the problem still exists and you're not able to overcome it in the way that you can function and have some peace of mind and some what do you call it, like um I'm trying to say, like, not just happiness in life, but just
That contentment.
like yeah, thank you, like being content with life, right? Then I think that that's when it's a good indication of seeking help, right? And asking for advice on how to deal with that. So I don't know if that's too generic for you.
No, no, no. That does help answer because it is kind of broad. Where I
Mm-hmm.
think after a certain point, it starts to become very specific to people as far as what it is that they're dealing with in their lives and what responsibilities that they have on their plate, and what starts getting affected by their addictive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it does kind of answer it on a broad stroke. And I think like when you start looking at more granular things, you kind of have to look at it a little bit more on a case by case
Mm-hmm.
basis, right?
Yeah, I mean, and different disorders have different trends to look for, and different criteria. So, that's what helps them, designate one versus another. And in addition to that, we also have to keep in mind that, this is a Western framework, right, of mental health and what constitutes addiction or what constitutes, a mental health, disorder. And so, um, you know that can change across cultures and across different regions of the world, in terms of what's classified as maladaptive, what's classified as
Hmm.
you know problematic in life.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I know you'd mentioned certain things like certain predisposition to specific addictions, or maybe it could be other factors that are surrounding a person. Could you talk a little bit about what it is, like whether these biological or environmental factors that put people at a risk for developing an addiction or addictions, or maybe even certain types of addictions? Maybe with just a few examples.
In how a person's environment makes addiction worse. Is that the question?
Either worse or just they start to develop an addiction because of that. I don't know if that's
Like
too
what? Yeah,
generic
I
of a
guess.
question.
Well, I guess another way to ask that question is like, what are some trends that you've seen? Like, hey, people in these sort of environments or these sort
There we
of
go.
like
Much better.
biological traits that cause them to become more susceptible to addiction.
Right. So, I mean, I was recently reading up on cocaine use, for example, and there's I can't remember the name of the book, but it's a book that basically tries to not only give you an understanding of the ins and outs of a particular type of addiction, but also it tries to replicate it chemically, scientifically, biologically, even genetically in some ways, to be able to demonstrate how, yes, this is cocaine doing this and not something else, or
Okay.
this is not a person's predisposition or whatever. So um, I'm trying to and you can extrapolate, to some degree across other forms of addiction, but generally speaking, um, one in Islam, alcohol is forbidden to all of us, right? But we grew up in a society where alcohol is prevalent, and you are familiar with the idea that there are some people that can drink a glass of wine or a shot of this or whatever, and they're good, like they don't need to keep drinking. And there's other people where they take one swig and they're gone, down the rabbit hole, and they get wasted, right? And so it's like, what makes someone more predisposed to being addicted versus not? And I think that definitely environment does play a role. um, for a person who has um, any form of addiction, behaviorally or otherwise, if you're in an environment where you're given cues to use or cues to engage in that behavior, right? If you're going to school and people are talking about um, things that they've watched online, or um, people who got wasted or got high, or did some crazy stuff. I mean, that's all stuff that definitely can be putting a person at a greater risk to test it out, to try it, to even or to relapse, right? And then in addition to that, and so those are all like little button pushers. Those are all little triggers, right? Um, there was one study that I was reading about where for cocaine use, they used lab mice or rats or whatever, and basically they created a system where they would teach a mouse or whatever to push a button, and the button would administer some sort of amount of cocaine in their system through an IV. And yeah, we can talk about how humane that is, some other talk, um, but anyways, so,
I
so
think I read
they did
about this one. Yeah.
they did this, and then what they did was they removed the button, right? And that it revealed another type of aspect of the addiction, which is like drug seeking behavior, right? So these are some of the other things that come with addiction, is like there are different warning signs that can exist, whether it's behavioral or substance addiction, that um, that are signs of addiction, right? So, for example, you know, needing to use more and more of the substance to get the same effect, right? That's called tolerance. Or, um, experiencing some sort of physiological response when you're not using the drug. That's
Withdrawal.
either right, withdrawals, right, that's causing you to want to use the substance again, or even preoccupation um, with the addiction. So it's not just when I use, it's when I'm done using, I can't stop thinking about when I'm going to use the next time, right? That's called drug seeking behavior, right? And so it's like, so you can imagine the little mouse, right? He's like, where's the button, where's the button, where's the button, where's the button, when they took it away, right? That's drug seeking behavior, right? And then after a certain amount of time, eventually the mouse will give up. But I think they waited 3 or 4 months, and then they reintroduced the button, right? And when they reintroduced the button, and this is so basically the drug is out of the mouse's system. There's no signs of drug-seeking behavior, right? There's no indications that this mouse is addicted or that it wants anything, right? But as soon as they brought the button back, the mouse not only like went for the button, but it binged, right? It went overboard. It ended up using way more than it did the first time, right? And so that's a really interesting phenomenon, which shows that, at least for cocaine use, right, it's having an impact on the brain, right, in a way that I don't want to say that's necessarily irreparable, but it did alter the brain, right? Whether it's repairable or not, it did alter the brain to the point where, after a certain amount of use and then stoppage and then bring the cues back to use, um, the mouse doesn't have the same self control it may have had in the first time in the initial use, right? Um, so it's just really interesting how, um, um, yeah, it's a slippery slope, man. And the other thing is that's another indicator. The reason I mentioning that was an indication that this mouse got pulled out of the environment it was in. Right, there are no buttons in this environment anymore. Right, so being in a place, sorry, there's some little fruit flies. Being in a place where there's access to whatever it is that a person is struggling with addiction wise, right? If all my friends are gamers and they're nonstop gaming, and or if I'm wowing, if I'm playing WoW, which I don't play, but and everyone's doing their what do you call it? Their hordes, or what do they call it? The quests or whatever, the raids, right? Yeah, it's like and then it's like, oh, you gotta go, right? But while you're eating dinner, all your friends are playing and they're in the raid right now, right? Like that's horrible. It does stuff to you, right? So it's like, well, if you didn't know all those people, there would be no temptation to need to go back, right? So that's that does play a role in it, right? Access and the things that trigger you in the button, having no boundaries in terms of when you can game and when you can't game, how long you can game, all that kind of stuff. It definitely does play a role to it.
Definitely, yeah. You know what you mentioned about the. Sorry, go ahead, Abdul.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a good segue to the question that I want to ask, and kind of center it on gaming a little bit. Was and this is in the notes as well. Like, how many? I guess nowadays we're seeing this pattern where a lot of major publishers are focusing on ensuring that the game has as much dopamine as possible. That the kids they're doing studies on this to make sure that the kids like are continuously playing, right? Whether it's in the form of like loot boxes or battle passes, like there's this like cycle of they don't want
daily
you to stop.
Rewards.
Yeah, daily rewards and just making you feel like you're like left out, and the feeling of FOMO.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, in this field of psychology, is this something that's being studied right now from like a academic perspective? Because this is going to have like far-reaching effects. I feel I'm not in that field, but this is can be very problematic.
So, in the back of the diagnostic manual of the DSM-5, now it's the DSM-5 TR, but don't ask me what that means. But anyways, there's a new edition out. But the even the DSM-5, which was the first one that I used to refer to, it in the back, I remember joking with my friends like, oh, there's like potential disorders to consider, for the future. So it's not officially a disorder yet, but it's like a proposed one, right? And they're still doing more studies. They want more data, and they want kind of the research, kind of like the one that I talked to you about regarding cocaine, but called internet gaming disorder.
They're gonna have rats play video games.
I have no idea how they're gonna test that out, but what's interesting, I went back into the TR one to read a little bit about it, and it mentioned that in the US it's still not considered a disorder yet, but it's heading there, and but it is already considered. The internet gaming disorder is a disorder in China, and South Korea.
Oh,
Right?
South Korea, I can see that.
So, so it's there. It's out there, and addiction is heavily like related to the idea of instant gratification, right? And that's kind of what society is all about right now. Everything is easy access. Your phone, your computer, your this, your that. Everything. You just by a push of a button, you can get it, right? You can get stuff delivered to your door in an instant. You can, you know, order food. You can buy whatever you want online. So you can do all these things, or even access explicit content or play a game just like that wherever you are. You're in the you're at the DMV online. You just pull up your phone. You're immersed in the game, right? The internet gaming disorder thing is more towards like PC type gaming, right? That's kind of the study they're doing. But it also, I mean, there's also gambling gaming, right? There's also like what you guys said, like all this in-game stuff that they're doing that it's difficult now because it's like, okay, like they're trying to separate it, at least from this point of the DSM point of view. It's like, all right, gambling's over here and gaming's over here, and then you have your other types of games that have other addictive type properties, but let's just separate that for now, because they want good data on the thing that they think is the biggest issue, right? And so it's like, but all of those, yeah, that's, I mean, like for example, like when I play Rocket League, I know there's like this thing where you can either purchase or they give you
loot boxes.
Right, loot box, and like that's slot machine, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
That's totally slot machine.
I think video game developer, or not developers, but big game publishers that are really in on these loot boxes, they keep trying to argue that loot boxes are not gambling.
Yeah.
And it's shown time and time again that this is basically like slot machines.
Especially when you're spending real money towards it.
And if you ever played any like sports game, like they literally set up like a slot machine, like you pull the lever and it's like, oh, you got this thing, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they banned it in the
E
EU, like they're especially
a lot of regulation in the EU is getting better on it, but there's nothing on the horizon, at least on the US side.
So like it says here, like in the DSM, it says this is under diagnostic features. So the essential feature of internet gaming disorder is a pattern of excessive and prolonged participation in internet gaming that results in a cluster of cognitive and behavioral symptoms, including progressive loss of control over gaming, tolerance, withdrawal symptoms, analogous to symptoms of substance use disorders. They typically involve competition between groups of players who are often in different global regions, so that extended duration of play is encouraged by time zone independence. Although internet gaming disorder most often involves specific internet gaming with multiplayer competition, it can include non-internet computerized offline games as well, although these have been less researched. The internet gaming often includes a significant aspect of social interactions during play, and the team aspects of play appear to be a key motivation. Attempts to direct the individual towards schoolwork or interpersonal activities are strongly resisted. And then it says, just last little report here, it says individuals with internet gaming disorder continue to sit at a computer and engage in gaming activities despite neglect of other activities. They typically devote 8 to 10 hours or more per day to this activity and at least 30 hours per week. If they are prevented from using a computer and returning to the game, they become agitated and angry. They often go for long periods without food or sleep. Normal obligations such as school or work or family obligations are neglected. So I mean, this is like we've all seen like videos of kids like throwing tantrums and this and that, and I think like even with my 1.5-year-old, like with like seeing how just a phone screen or a TV screen is so addictive. Like it's so like they they become zombies instantly, and it's like, hello, are you there? And they're not even looking at you, and it's like and then we're like you hear things like, oh, don't watch Cocomelon because there's so many colors and this and that, and it's being meant to stimulate specifically children so that they can't look away. It's like
they have scientists. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the exact same thing I was about to bring up.
Behavioral scientists that like do
Correct.
studies and make sure, like, okay, like on kids that watch these videos and then they make note of, like, oh, the kid turned away, okay, we need to change that, and like make it
Mm-hmm.
sure come
Mm-hmm.
back. Like,
Yeah,
it's insane
yeah.
how addictive they try to make those
Yes,
Exactly.
to
And
clarify, it's the
so
makers of Cocomelon. They basically, because it's not really a study. What they do to make it more addictive to kids is they have a kid, and there's two screens. One is Cocomelon, the other one is like nature, with two screens. One with Cocomelon, another one with like views of nature with like grass or birds or whatever. Anytime the kid turned away from Cocomelon to look at the nature screen, that's when they'll be like, okay, we need to do something about what made him turn away. Like, do we need
yeah.
to brighten up the colors more? Or yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Cocomelon's
Yeah,
pretty
man.
bad.
Yeah. I mean, so that's like, I think there is, like, in America, you cannot deny that there is a, capitalist, you know, um, agenda to this, which is that, I mean, like, if you think about it, like, if you look up the statistic of how many deaths in America we have from driving under the influence, for example, how many accidents, how many crashes, how many deaths, how many, I mean, I guarantee you the number is extremely significant, right?
Mm.
And have you seen any lobbying towards, trying to limit, advertising for alcohol,
Mm.
or even production of alcohol, or even, access to alcohol? The only thing that they do is they raise the age limit, right? And so it's like that's the government's way of trying to deal with the problem without dealing with the problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So why? Because alcohol makes good money, man. If you're in a restaurant and you serve alcohol, that's like 30+% of your revenue, right? So why wouldn't why would you want to put a stop to that? That's great money, So it becomes problematic when you have um, this idea of, okay, like, what is the crux of the problem, right? People are, scientists, like you said, are trying to make this more addictive. Why are they doing that? Is that actually beneficial to the kid? Is that morally right? Or is it how they put more money in their pockets? That's a problem.
It kind of getting into a similar talk about that. We talked about video game addiction or any sort of literature that's kind of video game addiction adjacent. What about media addiction in general? Because right now, with social media and our streaming services and our smart devices and our smartphones that are literally in the palm of our hand, people are just glued to those devices. A lot of people are just glued to them, just going through social media, whatever streaming service. Is there any literature on that? That may or may not be in the DSM, but has that been talked about
Yeah.
more within the clinical community?
I mean, I think in terms of, like, literature, um, I'm sure it's out there. I'm not necessarily familiar with that specifically in terms of, like, studying how addictive devices are versus, PC gaming versus other forms of media, social media in general, right, and other things, right? These are all these things. I mean, yeah, like, I have clients that come to me saying, like, yeah, in addition to pornography, I doom scroll,
Hmm.
right, and that's a problem. So it's like, okay, like, that's, yeah, like, these things are out there, right? I don't know too much about the research of all these things, and the DSM again is trying to stay in its lane about internet gaming disorder being more like the PC gaming thing, it seems. But um, I mean, I like to look at it from the Muslim point of view, which is, like things that are halal for you, right? To the extent that they get in the way of your obligations, become haram for you,
Hmm.
right? So if I'm watching TV to the point where I'm missing all my prayers, and then yeah, like that becomes haram for me until I correct that. So um, the problem is there are no haram police that are going to put you in cuffs until you do your 5 prayers, right? You have to figure this out yourself. Um, so yeah, I think that it's definitely something that we all need to consider. But I think our Deen also gives us a good idea and a good sense of trying to understand balance.
No, that's definitely very important, especially for us as Muslims to look at it from the Dean point of view about it. Um, now, we're talking about all these different addictions, and I'm sure there's definitely people out there that struggle with these issues, and I'm pretty sure there's people watching and listening that might be struggling with some of this themselves. What can what advice do you have for them? What is it that they could possibly do? Um, yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Um, I think that again, culturally, um, we're not out of the woods with this being taboo yet, and people not wanting to seek help because
When
of
you say not being taboo, you're talking about just the aspect of talking about your addiction or
correct,
any of your
yeah,
mental health issues. Okay.
right, getting
Yeah.
it, getting it out there. What about?
I was gonna say I can't ever imagine having that conversation with my immigrant parents like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, so yeah, it's that it can definitely be
Hmm.
catastrophic to a lot of families, but I think that that it's catastrophic only because this is unfamiliar, right, to
Mhm.
us culturally and otherwise, and the benefit is there. The confidentiality is also there. So
Hmm.
I mean, when you're under 18, you're still able to see a therapist and have a degree of confidentiality that you know even your parents don't get to know what everything you're talking about, and then as an
Right.
adult too. And so it's
Hmm.
like you can definitely seek that for yourself. You don't need to be the one that's going to change your entire community and your culture for to be with it. But I think that it addictions tend to make people think, because of the stigma also, it tends to isolate people, and it tends to make people think that they're alone in this.
Hmm.
And I think that that's problematic because just like we are all in this world together trying to get to the akhirah successfully, right, we're also in here to help each other to deal with this as well. And that's kind of what lamps of light is about, is we are trying to tell people you're not alone. You don't need to face this alone anymore. We're here, right, and we want to help. And so it doesn't have to be us, but we want to be one of those voices that tells people, okay, you can come outside of your from underneath the bed or the rug or whatever you want to call it, and um, you know you can work towards taking ownership of your life again. And um, I think that that's a really important step for our community, as a start. And so um, I think the like the best advice that comes to me is adina nasiha. Like you got to ask. You got to start. I mean, there's levels to change, right? There's a person who has no idea that there's even a problem, to the person who knows there's a problem that doesn't want to do anything about it, to the person that knows there's the problem and is wants to do something about it but doesn't really know where to start, and then the person that actually begins the process. So everyone is starting at a different starting point, right? But you even if we're not the ones for you, right, the fact that you got your feet wet, that is a big step, because now that gives a person the confidence to be able to say, okay, I can ask somebody else now. I can go somewhere. I can look and keep looking and seeking. What's best. What's the best way to um, yeah to remedy this. And it's very difficult. I mean, what's the success of people that quit smoking
Hmm.
cold turkey versus the people that need a medication or are going to therapy or whatever, have all these other, remedies and still struggle to quit smoking, right? It's a real small percentage. So,
Yeah. There's a very famous quote from this one doctor that talked about how quitting smoking is the easiest thing that he's ever done because he's done it so many times.
hmm,
So that kind of shows that an addiction isn't just something that is taken lightly in that sense. And I think you're absolutely right about the isolation factor of it. we spiritually, we could also see that as like kind of shaitan saying, oh, you're not alone, this is all you have left. So and the truth is, shaitan will try to whisper, oh, you are alone in this, this is all you have to rely on, fall back on, is
Oh yeah.
your
Oh yeah.
addictive behavior. And the truth is that you are not alone. You have community around you. There are many resources that you can use to seek for help. One of my I shouldn't say my favorite, but I like this approach to addiction recovery, at least with the 12-step programs that a lot of places have. It started out with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and kind of went into so many different, like Gamblers Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Sex Addicts
Mm-hmm.
Anonymous. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's two separate ones for that. Shopaholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. But their 12-step foundation starts with the first step being admitting that you have a problem, that it's affecting you negatively in your life. You have a problem that you're powerless over. And then
surrendering to your higher power.
The second step is to basically recognize there is a higher power that can help you with it. And the third step is to allow that higher power to help you. At this day and age, they use the term higher power a little bit more vaguely. About that, about just like, it's not just God, it's it could be the community around you. It's basically saying that you alone can't fix this yourself, so go outside of it. It's okay to seek help, basically.
Well, I think I should just clarify real quick that when I mean ask for help and don't be alone, like I don't mean like I'm not telling Abdul to go and tell his parents,
Right.
like that's not, I don't know if that would really even be helpful, even if it is, like I don't see how I could tell my parents. If you did, how would that benefit anything?
Yeah.
Right. So you definitely there's an etiquette to seeking advice, right? You go to the people that you believe are capable of resolving your issue, right? And so you go to the professional, right? If you if you have an illness, you go to the doctor, right? So you don't just go to the plumber or something and talk about this sciatica in your back or something, so it's like that's that's really important that and so when I say we're out there, we are a qualified entity that can help with this, right? And that's what we're trying to promote, not just telling the world and coming out of the closet type thing.
Right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that as well.
No, that's an important clarification. Thank you.
When this is sort of a tangent, but also like I'm tying it back to Muslim gamers, and throughout the years that we've been admitting the server and met so many people and seen just the nature of being an online place, you get a lot of different personalities, like people on the fringes of different sort of stuff. And we've had, I can't even tell you how many times we've had people that had certain levels of, they had different, they were struggling with different types of addictions in their life, and they would bring that on the server. And we had to we were forced to be like counselors for we're not qualified in any way to do any sort of counseling. There's these people that they had no one else, or they felt the most comfortable talking to people there, and that's where they they're like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I need help with this, whatever. And we would do our best to, in that situation, to talk to them. And I also noticed there were some folks that even got addicted to Muslim gamers as the server. Like that was, they were constantly checking messages and things, and they were just like obsessed to the point where it's an issue. It was like, it became a problem. And that's something we still struggle with today. There's like so many people on the server that we're constantly, it's a revolving door of people that are coming through. And I think it's a really important thing to reflect on yourself. And I'm super appreciative of the people that I see Muslim gamers as a safe space for them to come and say like, hey, we have this issue. I just, we're not qualified like psychologists or therapists or counselors to talk to you. it's great that you came here. You want like it's a first step. Seeking for help. You're asking. You're revealing it. That's like step one, right?
Right.
Definitely, if you're watching this and you have an addiction problem and you've chatted on MG about it, seek professional help, right? Don't just leave it on it. And it is, I'm like speaking from firsthand, it's very, very emotionally and like it's emotionally straining for everybody involved in the circle to be able to like be your pseudo counselor for your needs. Like that shouldn't be, that's not okay. You shouldn't just, uh, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just,
Well, I mean, like Muslim gamers has become a safe space for Muslim gamers, right?
yeah.
I mean, we had our fair share in youth group days, right, of situations and people that, did things that we were not even close to being qualified to knowing how to deal with these things, right? And I think that does speak to another really important aspect of this, which is that addiction, does not just start from the first puff or, the point to where they've, you know, had access to engaging in a particular behavior so long that it becomes, a problem habit, right? I mean, there's, like we understand even from today's discussion how, you know, how society promotes and allows access for us to become addicted from an early age, right? And so that's, prevention is huge, right? Parenting our kids is important, as well as um, teaching youth. Like, youth leaders need to and that's something that we're working on, actually. Like, we're trying to create some workshops, inshallah, that we can do for different Muslim orgs and communities to train them on how to deal with their constituents and their community, and even youth leaders to deal with,
Would have loved
their
that
their
one.
their peers, right?
Right, yeah.
To Oh man, right? And so yeah, like just becoming a therapist taught me how unequipped we were, but um like that's so important. Like kids need to know, because there are certain drugs, like, fentanyl, right? I mean, like, it's like, I don't know if you've seen those images of like how little amount of that powder you need to be a lethal dose,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was like a little bit of, like, it looks like baby powder. It's like a little bit of baby powder on the tip of a penny, on the edge of a penny, right? It was enough to be a lethal dose, right? You couldn't even cover all of Abe Lincoln's head with the powder, and that was enough to be a lethal dose, right? So if a kid wants to experiment and be like, oh, I wonder what this is like, that could be his death sentence, and he doesn't even know it, So prevention is huge. It's not just, now that I'm in it, what do I do, right? We need to attack this from the very beginning, which is, okay, this is where you live, this is what you're exposed to. You need to start becoming aware of what you're up against, and developing yourself to be able to find balance in everything. Because I mean, yeah, like my first cell phone, which wasn't a smartphone, right, was a senior in high school, right? And now smartphones are accessible to kids in elementary school, and and earlier. So it's like, yeah, that's, these are big questions, and big you know things to consider and think about, and work on for our community.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of things to think about there. But I think it's been a really great discussion, and we're really thankful, I mean, to have you on here, and also to our listeners and to our viewers, jazakallah khairan for tuning in to this important conversation. Maybe in a future episode we can get a little bit more deeper into specifics about this topic. But again, once again, big thank you again to our guest Amin, for joining us and sharing his wisdom and experience. Addiction, whether it's gaming, social media, or anything else, is something many in our community, they're silently struggling with it, and I'm glad we took the time to talk about it openly. Let's continue doing that with compassion and purpose. Now, if this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. If you're looking for support, there are organizations out there like Lamps of Light. They're doing incredible work. So like we kept saying in the episode, don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to seek help and to learn more. Before I get into dropping our socials, could you tell people where they could find more information about Lamps of Light? I mean, I could add that in the description
Well,
too.
yeah, it's lampsoflight.org. I mean, that's the starting point, and then you can
If you don't
browse
see
the website.
Amin's picture in the website, you're on the wrong one.
Yeah, I haven't gone to see, like, I mean, I know I'm in there, but I don't know how deep I or how, like, I hope hopefully not like front page, but yeah, man,
It's a gigantic banner of just Amin's face.
No, please God, no.
Yeah. No, but mashallah, it's a really great organization. We're definitely looking forward to doing more topics with Lamps of Light, just to talk about this, inshallah. As always, listeners, viewers, please make sure to follow us. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice, make sure to do that. Follow us on our socials. We have all the links in the description. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know what topics you'd like us to explore next. Until next time, take care of your soul, your screen time, and each other. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.